This episode of I Work for Him is brought to you by SaferNet, online at safernet.com.
Every day in America, more than 3,000 ministries are serving workplace believers by discipling Christ followers to live out their faith in their work. However, most of these organizations are working on their own, often recreating the wheel from their limited resources because they don't know there are others out there doing exactly the same thing.
I Work for Him has a vision to document the tapestry of the faith and work movement to enable and facilitate selfless kingdom collaboration across the country and bring harmony to the body of Christ in the workplace.
For more than a decade, God has been weaving the stories of workplace believers and the work of so many faith and work ministries into I Work for Him. He's been entwining us with these organizations so that you, too, can be a part of this great tapestry.
He's been connecting us in order to connect you.
Just like a tapestry, the work is sometimes messy and takes time. But in the end, a beautiful, unified picture emerges, more incredible than we could ever imagine. Please be a part of that mission.
You've tuned into I Work for Him, the voice of collaboration for the faith and work movement.
We are your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg, and our mission is to inspire every workplace believer to recognize their workplace as their ministry place, where they work with God every day. What can that look like in your workplace? Well, let's find out right now.
As believers, many of us are leaders who are hiring people to fill positions. How do we hire the right people every time? Seems like the most elusive question on the planet. You can't really hire the right people all the time, can you? Well, probably not, but you can give yourself a first-rate chance, can't you? It's amazing that hiring within most organizations is treated like a necessary evil instead of an incredible opportunity to help organizations grow and flourish, at the same time blessing a new hire with a new family. Think of all the detail that Jesus went through to hire the 12 disciples. One hire went bad, and the other 11 transformed the world. Will your next hire do that? Bob Spence is my mentor, a friend, and on our I Work for Him board of directors. Bob is an expert in hiring and has written an incredible book on hiring that I literally could not put down. And I don't say that lightly. Written as a story, Bob's latest book is an incredible resource that every person who needs to hire someone must read today. Bob Spence, it's not your first time, so welcome back to I Work for Him.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Martha. Glad to be back.
What's funny, Bob, is the first time you're on I Work for Him, you were a guest of our guest host, Ross Harrop, when you were serving as a chair for Convene. Over the last 10 years, Bob, what's God had you up to?
It's interesting. I moved to Florida, not just for the good weather, but I also moved here.
But mostly for the good weather.
Yeah. I moved here for Convene, but it didn't work out. So I'm not with Convene, but over the last 10 years since then, God has put me in a position to write this book. And the book is about hiring, but it also is about your faith. And also during those years, I've been working on men's ministry at the church and things like that. So He's kept me going forward. And as my grandmother said, He's kept me happy in the Lord.
I love that. And while you've been happy in the Lord, you have also had hiring as really one of a forte for you for decades. Where did you get all of your hiring experience?
Believe it or not, in the public schools. And it wasn't as a student in the public schools, but I was a high school principal and was hiring teachers. I didn't know what to do. And so I met a gentleman by the name of Ken Cardinal, and he was superintendent of the Kent, Ohio schools. And I expressed to him my concerns, and he introduced me to a group in Lincoln, Nebraska that had a teacher perceiver interview. So I learned that, and then I stayed in touch with Ken over the years, and he taught me hiring is simple, Bob. It's a discovery process. And he mentored me throughout, and then he eventually sold me his structured interviews that I had helped write some of them with him. And as I thought about that discovery process, in fact, that's the subtitle of the book, A Discovery Process. And if you take time to discover everything you can about a candidate before you make the offer, you're going to be a lot happier. But most companies don't do that.
How many people do you think you've hired over the years, Bob?
Well, personally, my own business is
Right.
like 25.
Okay.
But helping clients hire, I've helped hire over 300 key executives.
Wow.
And I've done over 6,000 interviews. I quit counting at 6,000 because it got to the point it was ridiculous.
That's awesome.
We've done almost 6,000 interviews over 12 years. Bob references book. Here's the book: A Game Plan for Hiring the Right People. Game Plan for Hiring the Right People. The Power of a Discovery Process. Now, Bob, this book, I love this book. Choosing Winner System. That's I call it your patented approach, but it's your copyrighted, trademarked approach to hiring. But you didn't just write a book on blah, 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 hire, do this, blah, 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 hire, do that. You wrote a story that put the system into action in a book form. And I loved that. I mean, literally, I've been mad at you since I read this last year because you didn't kill off the antagonist, Brandon, in his car wreck. I mean, I was disappointed because
That's
he
terrible.
was so mean. Well, it's just fiction, so it's
Oh,
okay.
okay.
But, I mean, what made you decide to put this in story form? I mean, it totally communicates the method, but what made you decide to make it intriguing?
Believe it or not, I've written this book twice before. Both times when I finished each one, I actually finished them. And when I finished them, I started reading them and thinking, I wouldn't want to read this. This is just like every other interview book on the market. They're all the same. List it, regurgitate it, list it, regurgitate it. And I thought, there's got to be a better way. When I was reading some of Patrick Lencioni's work, and he writes in a business fable fashion, which this book is. It's a business fable. And so I thought, I could do that with my system. And so I created this fictional company with a fictional leadership team. And in the book, they go through hiring a new director of ops. And you get to experience the system on how to do it. And at the same time, it's a story. And like Jim referenced, there is an antagonist in there. And no, I did not kill Brandon off.
But you should have. Hey, we're going to talk a lot more about this book and about hiring and really how this should impact us. I mean, as believers, how we hire people causes our business to flourish, our organizations to flourish, and those people we hire to flourish, not to mention all the people around us. We're going to be right back with more with Bob Spence. Hang on. More from my work for him right around the corner.
Do you want to make an impact for the kingdom of God without quitting your day job? Then here's some great news. God is calling you into full-time ministry right where you are. The job that you hold, the work that you do, and the people you work with, none of that is by accident. Your workplace is your mission field. Change the way you think about faith and work by picking up a copy of our new book, I Work for Him, by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore. And remember, you aren't just working for yourself, you're working for the Lord.
Hey, welcome back to I Work for Him. We're talking today with Bob Spence about his book, A Game Plan for Hiring the Right People all the time. Well, he doesn't say that, right? The Power of the Discovery Process. But listen, this is a show about living our faith at work. And Bob, before we get into, I want to do a mention here about something else. But before we do that, how does hiring, in your mind, connect your faith to your work?
Years ago, I was working with a company that you may have heard of, In-N-Out Burger.
We ate there one time in Arizona.
Okay. Anyway, at the time, Rich Snyder, who passed away, but Rich was the president, and he had me training all his people how to hire. And at one point, he asked me to help him hire a CFO. And then he said to me, make sure you teach us how to hire only Christians. I said, well, Rich, one, there'd be some legal issues with that, but I don't worry about legal issues. But why don't you just hire the best one available who's competent, can get things done, and then share your faith with them, and maybe they'll decide to come to the Lord. If you have hiring only Christians, you're not going to have a chance to witness to anybody. And so with hiring, what I've taught people to do is identify the values that you need to have in an employee in your organization. And they can be Christian values. You're not going to be in any legal trouble unless you say you got to be a Christian, and then you have a problem. But if you identify the values and you interview people and you interview the right way, they'll share their values and they'll be genuine and honest about it. And you can build an organization. I've got a client out in Iowa that they hire and they don't worry about the person's faith, but they are all people of faith. And when the person comes in, all of a sudden they realize, oh, he's starting the meeting with a prayer. Well, he's a private company, so he can do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's the key to it is, and in the book, I have a chance to read where the members of the leadership team, the ladies on the team are part of a prayer and squares group at their church. And the president, the CEO of the company, he always begins the meeting with a prayer in the book. And then when they have problems, they gather for prayer. And it's all woven through the idea of hiring. So I hope that answers that.
And isn't the guy that's, the owner of the business, isn't he also on the I Work For Him board of directors?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. All right.
But real life stuff happening right there.
What I hate to correct my mentor, but if you are an organization of under 15 people, you actually can discriminate and only hire Christian people and tell people you're only hiring Christian people. And if you're a nonprofit organization that in your statement says that you're only going to hire Christian people, you can do that. But I recommend, no matter what, if you're running a business, to hire non-believers, because how in the world are you going to get a chance to reach them for Christ? Like Bob said. All right, speaking of books, as you're hiring people for their next career, they may be people listening that are planning to end their paid career and focusing on retirement. At I Retire For Him, we say, if you're not dead, you're not done. We want to hear, do you want to hear more about this in the next chapter of your calling? Because if you've got a pulse, you've got a purpose. Order one copy of I Retire For Him for $50, and we'll send you a pack of 10 to share with your peers. It's a game changer. Just send me an email so we can ship it direct to you. Jim@iworkforhim.com. That's Jim@iworkforhim.com. And Martha will have that link in the show notes.
For sure. So, Bob, your approach to hiring someone is very different. Do you think our culture is ready for your approach?
Only if they want to be successful.
Oh. Well, that's a good response. That's how much Bob believes in this process, right? If you want...
I've just seen so many positive results, like out of that 300 plus key leaders I've helped hire. Mm-hmm. The average tenure of those people has been 7.8 years, which is really high, actually. And also, out of those over 300, only one got fired.
Wow.
And so we know it works. It works because you involve everybody in the organization that's connected to that hire. And it works because you're using a value-based approach. What are the values? It works because you take time to put them through several interviews to come up with the right hire.
Wait a minute, you said involve everyone who's actually going to be directly involved with that hire. So you're saying, so let's just say I'm coming in as a CFO. Normally I get interviewed by the CEO and maybe the COO, but you're saying I'm going to get interviewed by maybe my assistant or maybe my managers or VP level people. I mean, so people that are going to report to me are going to interview me as well?
Yes, and what we do is we set up interview day. And in the example you just gave, good example, by the way, the CEO would do a one-to-one interview, about 75 minutes long. Their leadership team would do a 75-minute interview, and the future direct reports would do the same thing. And then they gather at the end of the day to talk and compare. Plus, we have every candidate has a host for the day. They used to call this my James Bond technique, because the host learns more because they're with the person for the tour at the first part of the day. They spend every break with them. They take them to lunch. Mm-hmm. And the team members at the end of the day turn to the host and say, tell us about the person you hosted. They have so much information, it's unbelievable.
You know, I love your approach because I don't think enough people put weight in the fact that when you're making a commitment, both to work for an organization and the organization hiring somebody, it's a really big deal. You know, you're expecting results. You're expecting a good, the culture to translate, all of those things. And a lot of times it's like a half hour, an hour, whatever. And I know you're doing higher level, but I think that the emphasis you put on the time that you spend with that person is so incredibly important. Okay, so let's talk about before you ever start advertising for a position, you recommend that people really define the position and also the character of the person that they're looking for. Why is that so key?
Because the greatest single most important thing about hiring is the who, WHO. The who means their behavior, values, beliefs, characteristics, and traits. You have to sit down with your leadership team if you're hiring a member for that team, or if you're a manufacturing team hiring for the manufacturing team. You sit down ahead of time and you brainstorm, who is this person? And when you get done with that, you brainstorm a category I call the what. What are they responsible for? And you spell that out. You spell out what does good performance look like? And then you take time to do the ticket. What are the experience, education, and skills we want to require, prefer, and desire? You put together a position profile. Now, that position profile is not the job description. I want to stress that because people think, well, then we got the job description done. No, you don't. The job description is finished when the person arrives on the scene and you sit down with that person, the CEO with that CFO, and they put together that job description together, and every category is based on performance metrics because that ensures competency. The person owns it. And I always tell people during the process, like candidates, I'll say, understand something. I am working for this client and I'm helping them find the right fit and match. I'm also going to make sure it's the right fit and match for you. It's not a one-way street. And when you interview with my client, you better be assessing as to whether you're the who or not the who.
Are you the who?
I'm really trying to keep that song from coming out of the microphone right now.
No singing, Jim.
Who are you? Who? I mean,
You just had to do
Bob,
it.
seriously,
You just had to do it for
All right.
Bob.
So
Okay.
I know for a fact that sometimes you can go through this process and have an offer fail. Do you automatically go to your number two, or do you start the process all over again?
I've done it both ways. In other words, we maybe had a search, and I always send it when I lead the search. I narrow it down to 3 for the client, and I tell them if they're doing their own, they also narrow it down to 3. I had a client one time say, "Can we have 4?" I said, "You don't want to do that." They said, "Oh, let us have 4." I let them have 4 instead of taking 2 days to make the decision. It took 2 months.
Oh, man.
They couldn't make the choice. Human beings do well when you got 3 options. And so we do that with the 3 options. Then when they get done, they choose the one that's the best fit and match.
Right. So if they choose the one that's the best fit and match and then the offer fails, is there really a point to going to number 2 because that wasn't the best fit? Should they start the process all over again? Because a lot of people are like, I don't want to go through this again. I'll just take number 2.
No, I won't let them do that. But what we tell them is this: look, let's talk about the other 2 candidates out of the 3. And in one case, we definitely did go to number 2 because it was so close. They weren't even, they really had trouble. And most of my clients, that's the problem. At the end, we get hard to make the choice because at least 2 of the 3 are really close. At times we've said, no, let's go back and repost and start over. And then they look at me and say, oh, I said, well, wait a minute. Understand, you did not make a mishire. Let's celebrate.
Yeah.
So we're going to spend more time. We're going to get the right fit match this time for sure.
And I love your perspective, Bob. And, none of us like to have what we might consider failure. But like you said, you were kept from maybe a worse situation down the road just because of circumstances. So when something fails, it can really get frustrating or feel like it's time that's being stolen from us. And that's really what can happen when our computers or our phone get compromised. We at I Work for Him and personally depend on SaferNet to keep us protected from all those unwanted menaces that seek to steal and destroy our livelihood. So SaferNet is there to protect all of our devices through their VPN, their internet filters, and so much more. You can check them out at safernet.com.
Yeah, Bob, let's go into this a little deeper. As believers, why should the way we hire be different?
Well, I'm going to answer it two ways. One, ideally, it shouldn't be different because everybody should be doing the same thing to get the right fit and match for their organization. But as believers, it's more important than non-believers, or I'm going to call them pre-believers, because eventually they're going to face Jesus and realize, oops, I made a mistake. However, as a believer, if you're going to hire people, if you're going to bring them in, you want to make sure that you're getting people that are going to believe as you believe and be part of this team.
What I love about your book is the simplicity of the method. I mean, somebody can really buy a game plan for hiring the right people and get a very good idea of the choosing winners system and put it into action. But while they're reading it, they're going to go, I want to know how it happens. I want to know who they end up hiring in the end. And I was going to ask you a question that kind of was a little spoiler, and I'm not going to do that. I changed my mind because, listen.
Don't give it away.
You got to read the end of this book. I am guaranteeing you, listen, I'm guaranteeing you that if when you read this book, and if you're not thrilled all the way to the end, because I literally couldn't put it down, Bob will give you your money back. That's what I'm
You're
telling
guaranteeing it
I'm
for Bob?
guaranteeing that for Bob.
Well, you know what, Jim? I just want to say one thing. You and I, for years, have been advocates of fiction and learning through fiction. And Bob, you call this a business fable. And we love that approach because it's not telling, it's experiencing. And how much better to remember when you've been in the scene and you've seen it happen and you saw it put into place. And so I just want to commend you on that because having a different approach, instead of it just being a bullet pointed, like you said, tell and retell and all of that, you gave people an experience and people can start with that to get some better ideas on how, no matter what level of position they are hiring for, to try a fresh approach and to really see some success there. And so I just want to commend you on that because we are fiction lovers and we believe that every author that writes has a purpose and there's a message that's being shared, but it's not telling. And so thank you very much for doing that.
And I want to tell you, sometimes people write fiction and put in their agenda within it, and it just, you're like, you want to poke your eyeballs out and burn your fingernails out with acid. This is not that book. I really couldn't wait to find out who they hired. Yeah. And I was also, again, as I said, disappointed that the antagonist didn't die in the car
He's
wreck.
there for another day.
But I'm
and
giving
another chance.
Yeah.
Here's some good news for you, Jim.
Okay.
The antagonist is in book 2.
Book 2? Okay, well, if you
there's
already
a
got,
reason.
if you got the guy, if you got him hired, what's book 2 about?
No, he wasn't hired.
Okay, but I mean, but at the end of this book, somebody gets hired for this company.
Yep.
So you're
Tell us about book 2.
Yeah, what's book 2 going to be about?
Book 2 is from my experience working with clients. After we hire somebody, they sit there and they say, wow, we've learned we got a lot of issues we have to deal with. Our managers don't know how to coach. We found that out during hiring. We found out our managers don't understand budgeting and processes. They don't understand decision making. They don't understand how to communicate effect. So the second book, this whole team, the same team, same characters, they move forward and they make a list of the 7 key issues. And during the second book, you see them work together to resolve it. And the antagonist comes back and tries to throw a monkey wrench into that whole thing.
Oh, there's a reason he's around.
That's
great, Bob, and we look forward to book 2.
Yes, we do. I will be happy to read an early version and help you with any editing so I can figure out what happens to Brandon, because I want to know what happens to Brandon. Bob, what I love about this conversation, and we've just barely touched it, is that there really is the right way to hire people. And as believers, we should want to hire the right way because our businesses are about flourishing for our employees. So if you're hiring somebody, they're going to be an employee. The employees' families, our customers, our vendors, everybody that's involved. And so hiring is so important because it's got to match where you're going as an organization. And I've known you long enough now to know that when you hire somebody or help an organization find people to hire, those are good fits and it works. So Bob, Spence, I'm glad that you brought a game plan for hiring the right people to iWork for him so we could talk about it. And I do appreciate you, especially being my mentor and friend too.
Thank you.
Any final questions, Martha?
No, I think we covered it all.
Check out Bob online at bobspenceconsulting.com or on Amazon to get his book, A Game Plan for Hiring the Right People. You've been listening to I Work For Him with your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg. We're Christ followers. Our workplace, it's our mission field, but ultimately, I work for him.
This episode of I Work For Him is brought to you by SaferNet, online at safernet.com.
World War III started on your computer when Al Gore unleashed the internet in 1994. Want to fortify your business against cyber attacks? SaferNet VPN is the answer. Our easy-to-use cybersecurity app protects your enterprise on all fronts. Plus, secure your family's online journey with powerful internet filters. Embrace simple yet robust cybersecurity with SaferNet VPN now. Get secured now. Sign up at safernet.com. That's safernet.com.
Did you know that God has a calling on your life? It's true. He's called you to bring Jesus to the world. For some, that may look like a pulpit or a foreign mission field, but for most of us, it looks like a construction site, a cubicle, a hospital, or a classroom. Wherever it is that you work, live, volunteer, and invest, that is your mission field. To learn more about integrating your faith into your work and retirement, check out our books, I Work For Him, She Works For Him, and I Retire For Him, by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore.
Thanks for listening to the I Work For Him podcast with your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg. Please visit iworkforhim.com to learn more about connecting your faith and work, to join the I Work For Him Nation, or subscribe to our weekly blog. You can also follow us on social media at I Work For Him to stay up to date and meet our guests. If today's message spoke to you, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. Your review will launch more workplace missionaries across America. That's at I Work For Him and online at iworkforhim.com. I work, the number 4, him.com.